Welcome to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers, newbies, and veterans, and everyone in between. We're hosted by M.A. Lee with the assistance of Remy Black and Edie Rooms, all from Writers Inc. Books. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Each episode lasts as long as it takes to fix a quick dinner, drive a short commute, or take a brisk walk. Resources and links are in the show notes. Visit us at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Now, on to this week's episode. We have reached the last episode associated with the Summer Writing Challenge. Our quick tip covers the 3 sets of 7 that we writers need for every story start. Because we're moving to the next writing, right? Reiner Prochaska offers a fascinating view of writing challenges in discussing his 2 novels and other writing. For our check-in, I'm talking the next series. We're wrapping everything up, so let's begin. You've finished the writing challenge. What's next? Let that book steep like tea before you tackle revision, and in the meantime, develop 3 sets of 7 with success for each thing that you write. First set of 7, develop 7 characters. You'll have 2 main characters, the protagonist and the antagonist. 2 more essential characters, a confidant, the best friend, the one who knows the protagonist's secrets, not the heart secrets, but all the others. And also the seeming ally. The seeming ally character is more important than the confidant. This is the archetypal shapeshifter, the character who begins trusted, but then is not. An alternative form of the shapeshifter is to begin as a not trusted character, who then becomes so. A seeming ally, however, is purely devious and manipulative. Then we have 4 required character sets. Blocking figures. These are people who interfere with the protagonist and the path that they have chosen. They block the protagonist from their desired goal. They can supply guilt, as the protagonist is pulled between the old easy path and the newer challenging path that leads to her or his desire. And foils. Characters who mirror the protagonist and proceed along the same path, only to fail, often tragically. They foreshadow what may happen to the protagonist if he or she does not make the dynamic changes necessary. Foils reflect one or several of the personality traits of the protagonist. These are characters who can be associated with the protagonist, then killed off to create a suspenseful belief in the audience. And walk-ons and cameos. Walk-on characters provide information or do minor errands. Cameos are characters you want to highlight, especially if they're part of later or previous books. Second set of 7, the plot 7. Plot 7 will tell you if a story's there or warn you if you just have a burgeoning idea, still in the incipient stage. The plot 7 is out of order for a reason. Follow the order and rearrange when you're finished. And write it as white-hot creativity. First, open and close. Plot 1 is the beginning. Introduce your protagonist in a key scene. Second, the ending. What kind of ending do you want? What will it look like? What impression will you leave the readers with when they close the book? Second segment of the plot 7, danger, danger, danger. Plot 3 is the protagonist's greatest stress point, their lowest point, and what event will put them there and how they will recover. Plot 4, the antagonist's early triumph over the protagonist. The antagonist has seemingly won. What occurred? How does the protagonist react? How does the antagonist act and then react? Where will each go from there? And plot 5, the final battle. This is not the ending. This is the moment the protagonist takes the antagonist down. Fist pump. What sets up the final encounter? How does this ultimate encounter occur? Set the stakes high. This is the defeat of the representative of evil by the representative of honor. And last section of the plot 7, 2 planned ironies. Plot 6, an early twist. What the protagonist expects that will not occur. What or who will prevent this early event from occurring? Plot 7, final thing to write, the seeming ally's betrayal. Betrayal is one of those things that hits everyone in the gut. This is another scenario presenting irony, usually occurring before the protagonist's greatest stress point or occurring before the final battle. The purpose of betrayal is to show the protagonist's ability to keep pursuing the dear desire, even in the face of betrayal. The final set of 7 is to develop 7 work steps. First, the rough draft. No tinkering, no editing, just writing. Take the plot 7 and write the described scenes and all intervening sequels. Launch into that book. About 40 pages in, you'll know if you have a working story or not. What special skills and learning need to occur to set up the escape from the stress point? What foreshadowing about betrayal needs to occur? Second, finish. Finishing is key. The story doesn't breathe until you finish. Stick with the project until its conclusion. Many wannabe writers have dozens of stories, but they haven't finished. Having a complete draft is exceptionally difficult and exceptionally important. Third, revise the draft. Additions enrich the story and present your voice. Add in descriptions of characters and settings, expand on events, provide the viewpoint characters' thoughts and feelings during scenes. Fourth, do your first read-through and discover plot holes. This can only be done by rereading the whole manuscript, hopefully in one day. Make notes about problems and where to add more hidden clues. Then go back and add them. Fifth, keep your characters on firm ground. In your read-through, you may discover character discrepancies. Every character's personality should be set from the beginning. Check actions and reactions to ensure consistency. Don't change a character's behavior just because it's easy. Sixth, foreshadow sly evil. Add in early examples of the antagonist's villainy or outright evil. The antagonist's minions need to show up as bad people. They can avoid evil, but they definitely need to be people who have chosen the wrong path. And ensure that your seeming ally has 3 touches that hint at her or his true character allegiance to something other than the protagonist, or merely to themselves. And seventh, enhance your writing. Every 5th manuscript page or so, work in an example of figurative language or a special sentence structure. These touches will make you as a writer stand out. Don't overload the manuscript with these enhancements. That's interjecting yourself into the story, which can be jarring to the reader. And the reader will think, oh yeah, we got an artsy-fartsy author who thinks highly of herself. Not certain I like that. Add similes and metaphors, symbols and sentence structures. Elaborate on dialogue and descriptions. Work in hidden clues. Sharpen the red herrings so they flash. Divide and conquer. Reconsider and twist. Make people devious. And you'll make your readers angsty. That's it. Finish these 3 sets of 7 and you'll have a story you're proud of. Hi, this is Reiner Prochaska coming to us on the Right Focus. Why don't you introduce yourself to us, how you got into writing and what you're doing with your writing?
So I officially sort of started writing in graduate school. I'd always known I wanted to be a writer. And when I moved to this country from Germany in 1990, I had to sort of start over. And that's when I decided I was going to pursue acting and writing professionally, like I've always wanted to.
Right.
So I went back. school and I got my graduate degree in writing in a place where I now teach writing. I've been teaching there for almost 25 years. Um, it's where I discovered screenwriting, which I did for a while.
Mhm.
But I write mostly for the stage. I have been for a few years, and
Right,
it's been produced. And then I kind of rediscovered writing the novel. So I
right.
just published my second novel a couple
Great.
months ago. So that's where I am.
Well, great. Uh, so what brought you to the States from Germany?
It was originally for personal reasons, and then I ended up staying here, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to sort of do the things I always wanted to do.
Like reinventing yourself.
Yeah, and just pursuing something that was more related to the arts than to
Right.
business. I think the business background that I brought with me has helped me in other ways in the arts, communicating with people and having meetings and things like that and organizing things. So it's not a bad thing, but I'm excited to be more involved in the creative side of things.
I know when I retired from my career, I completely changed uh, my, I won't say my personality or my behavior because that was always there, but I guess I was able to do it full time as
Mhm.
opposed to I had a persona that I used in my career, and that persona I could drop, and I no longer had to maintain it or anything. And it was nice to actually pursue the things that I wanted to pursue once that career was over with.
Right.
Yes, I understand that totally. The
I'm
career
sure
was
you
a
do.
challenge. What I'm doing now is not really a challenge. So, how do you deal with challenges in your writing, and what challenges have you faced and overcome?
I think the thing that I do find the most challenging or have found in recent years is I've pretty much focused for the most part on historical material.
Hmm.
So my novel that was published 5 years ago is set in a POW camp here in Frederick during World War II.
Hmm.
So it covered sort of 1914 until 1945 mostly. The book I just published is set in 10th and 11th century Iceland and 14th century Greenland.
That's the saga.
This is the Bergthora Saga. I'm right now. I'm producing a Living History Festival at Catoctin Furnace here in Frederick for the first time this year. So this is set during the Revolutionary War.
Hmm.
So I do a lot of research, and my challenge is always, how do I take that material and make it an organic world and background and not turn it into a history lecture? Because we've all seen movies and stage productions where it's like, this is nothing to do with storytelling. This is someone like I did all this research and I'm going to tell you all about that.
And I
So
may go on 30 pages, you're just going to have to deal with it.
right. So here's where I'm like sometimes struggling like and I keep doing more and more research. It's like I think I have everything and then I get to a point and I'm like, is this feasible? Would this have happened? Would the person have done this? So I do more research. So it almost never ends until the very end, but I'm
Right.
always sort of like, I go back and I have friends read it, and I'm like, if this doesn't work, if it's not an organic kind of world and background, that has to be in the background rather than in the foreground, then please let me know. Because
Right.
because when you've worked on something, and you know this, when you've worked on something for a long time, you get to the point where you kind of lose objectivity. You're so immersed in that project that you're on it. Like when I teach writing, that's never a problem. I can always give my students feedback because I can take that step back and go, this is great, this is wonderful, rethink that. But in for my own work, it takes some putting it aside for a few weeks and then coming back.
I
That where
don't think
something,
it could. I don't think we have, well, I know we have emotional connection with our writing, but
Mhm.
it's almost as if in being invested in our work, we have put our whole brain into it. And
Yeah,
so our brain is focused on this particular thing, and we need somehow to break out of that pattern
yes.
and be open to other things.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Yeah.
and that's where I always invite honest feedback. I don't want people to tell me how good it is. I'm like, if there's anything that doesn't make sense, anything that took you out of the moment because it
Mhm.
doesn't seem and students do that. Years ago, I was teaching a creative writing class, and I used a scene from my previous novel that started as a screenplay, and it was a blood transfusion during World War II. And one of my students said, "Did they do that then?" And I thought that's a really great question.
Yeah.
Because and I had done the research, and I'm like, yes, they were doing it on a regular basis. But I was like, I'm glad he asked that question because that's something people would get tripped up with. They were like, no, wait, that doesn't make any sense, or that's not logical. So that's good that we sort of question these things and make sure that it all works.
Yes. And that's us becoming in part of the story.
Yes.
Uh, as the audience, we invest into the story and something clicks with us and we're going like, what, did this work?
Mhm.
How did this
Right.
work? Kind of thing. And we as writers, we go right over the top of that sometimes. We know, but we
Mhm.
don't, we perhaps haven't given the steps for them to realize as well.
Mhm. It was interesting because I submitted my most recent novel to several professional reviewers, and it was amazing to see what they got. Where I was like, I wonder if readers will get that, and they nailed it. I'm like, oh, thank God, because I wasn't sure that was coming clearly across anymore.
Right.
And that's always I think when talking about challenge, that's the other challenge that, as you said, we become so involved in this project
Mhm.
that we're no longer objective observers. We're
Right.
so, such a part of it that it's hard to step back and go, maybe that doesn't work so well. Maybe I need to think of something else here.
It's like someone recounting an event of their past
Mhm.
and they remember all of these details, but you might not, and in their telling of the story to you, you might not get all of those details. And so you start asking, and then those details come
Mhm.
out.
Right.
And you almost wish you had a tape recorder so you could record it and then put it back in the correct form for them when they're,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And audiences always bring their own background to each
Mhm.
story. That's the other thing, that what one person gets out of a story is going to be something totally different another person will get out of it.
That's one
And
of the things I love about art because
yeah,
each person brings their own interpretation to it, whether it's a painting or whether it's watching a ballet or whether it's reading a story.
yeah.
They bring themselves into it and they're invested in it.
And always for different reasons. It's
Yeah.
something that happened in their childhood, and suddenly something resonates with them that someone else wouldn't really necessarily pick up on.
Hmm. Right. Right. So, how else have you discovered challenges in your writing? Anything with your productivity or your discipline of writing?
Well, that's always finding time, because I'm an actor, I teach, I'm producing this Living History Festival right now, so there's all this organizational
Hmm.
stuff and infrastructural stuff. So making time, and I usually write mostly at night. I
Right.
find it's the most quiet time. So sometimes between 10:30 at night until 1:30 is when
Hmm.
I find the most time to just quietly sit on my computer and do most of my writing. And I try to do it if I'm working on something, I try to do it every night if I
Right.
can. And it's not always possible, and that is definitely a challenge. But it's also I find when I haven't written in a while, it's almost like it's a muscle that has atrophied. It's like it's really difficult. And then after a week or so, it's a groove. I'm finding it so easy to do it again. It kind of flows out of me. Where in the beginning, it's like pulling teeth to,
Yes.
to kind of get into that groove again.
I know, but when I'm doing some nonfiction writing, I did that for so long that
Mm,
it just pours out of me, and I have
mm,
no difficulty whatsoever. I don't have to plan it. It all structures itself in my head,
mm.
strangely enough, because I am not a structured person. But doing it for so long, it became automatic. But when I sit down to do fiction, if I haven't written in a solid week,
Mm.
that first sentence
Mm.
just I scratch it out and I rewrite it and I scratch it out and I rewrite it. Then I'm back up, like uh,
Mm.
3 or 4 hours in the scene and I start up again. you know. Um, so it's hard to keep that consistency in the writing.
Yes. That's
Mhm.
why,
Okay, so I think we were talking about writing, and we break out of the consistency and how difficult it is to get back into that consistent pattern of writing. So, did you have something else you
yes.
wanted to add about that?
No, I think it's just that we all, and unless we're the few lucky people who can do it absolutely full time,
Hmm.
um, and can get up in the morning and just do it for 8 hours. Th Those of us who have other responsibilities, and other artistic pursuits just have to make sure that we try to find that structure of doing it regularly, even if it's just for an hour. And that's the other thing I do, even if I can do 3 hours a night, just going over something I wrote the night before, revising that, just to be involved in it and engaging in the material before I continue moving forward with it.
Right, right. Now, did you find any difficulty in writing the POW book and then moving to your saga, your I would call it dark ages, the early medieval
Mm.
ages, um, in the historical aspect of that?
So they were sort of two different processes because
Hmm.
the POW novel started as a screenplay in 2006
Right.
and got optioned in 2008, and the production company ended up not doing anything with it. So in 2015 we tried to raise the money ourselves to just do it independently, and that didn't really work.
Hmm.
So at the time, I did the novel sort of as a fundraising thing, that if people donate a certain amount of money, that they would become a character in the novel. And I was kind of like fed up with it at that point. And one of the actors on the production came to me and said, "I really think you need to finish this novel. I think it's a really great story. And if we're not getting the story out in any other way, that would be the way to do it." So
Hmm.
most of the stuff had already been researched and written. It was really just sort of translating it from the screenplay, the sort of more visual medium, into the novel. And I added some stuff, and I elaborate on it. And then when I found a publisher, the Permanent Press in on Long Island, they were like, "Well, this is technically a first novel, so you need to get rid of 80,000 words." So I had written all this stuff, and a lot of it was from the perspective of women in war, which I really wanted to focus on. It's like we always look at men in war, and I kind of want to look at it as, how do women react to this? And I had to get rid of a lot of stuff I really loved. I look at it back now, and I'm like, there's maybe I'll do something else with it at some point.
Like a
Um,
companion novel.
Yeah, or sort of, those kind of things. So with Bergthora Saga, it was different because we had just come back from Iceland, and I had the idea, and then I had to put it on hold because um, I was working with my editor on Captives,
Hmm.
and that took like 4 or 5 months with the editing and copy editing process. Um, but then once I knew I had the time to devote to the Icelandic saga, I did a few months of research. The nice thing for me teaching at a university is I have access to the databases on campus.
Hmm.
So I ended up getting like 120 or 130 scholarly articles from Viking Age historical experts and linguistic experts. Um, and then I got maybe 20, 25 books from experts. So I wanted to make sure that I had a really strong basic understanding of it. I knew it wasn't going to make me an expert, obviously, but I wanted it to be a highly informed amateur, at
Right.
least to really thoroughly understand that world. And I lucked out. I found a professor at the University of Manitoba, who teaches Icelandic and Icelandic literature. And I ended up hiring him to review an early draft of the manuscript for authenticity to make sure it was right. And there's some indigenous aspects of it, and he is indigenous also. So he was able to give me some insight there. So it was really a wonderful opportunity finding him and getting all this wealth of feedback and information that I all used and incorporated into the story.
Right. That sounds fascinating. It sounds fascinating.
It was
How
it was
did
a
you,
it was a wonderful experience.
right. How did you land on a particular central point of view since you were dealing with so much historical data? How did you develop that central point of view for for your story?
So the thing is, there is sort of a central point of view, and then there's an individual. So basically, the way it's structured is that the frame narrative takes place in 14th century Greenland as the North colonies are kind of dying out.
Right.
There's a climate change, and so in this frame narrative, the historical bishop of Gardar tells this young monk that he should tell the story of his ancestors in Iceland as a saga, to
Mhm.
be given to as a gift to the Archbishop of Norway and to the Pope in Avignon to try
Mhm.
to like get support for the dying colony.
Right.
And so the other part of it, the second part is the saga that this young monk actually writes, the way an Icelandic family saga would be structured,
Mhm.
the sort of conventions of language that they would use, the way they would describe things. And then I'm contrasting that with the first person accounts of the actual people in his saga in the 11th century, sort
Right.
of the lives leading. Because the point I wanted to make with the novel also is that the sagas were all written somewhere 100, 200 years after the fact,
Mhm.
mostly by monks, so from a male Christian perspective.
Right.
And they're set during pagan times. So how do we reconcile those stories when 200 years later a Christian
Yes.
monk is well, this is what I think that the story should be. Um, so that we have this is what he's saying, and this is what these people who are actually leading these lives are saying. And
Mhm.
it's, sometimes it overlaps perfectly, and other times it could not be more different if we tried, because he's heard it through his family's stories over generations, and people keep adding things and sort of putting their own spin on things, and that's what he ended up with. Um, so that we have his central viewpoint, sort of like this is my story and how I relate to that, and then we have all these individual viewpoints that contrast with his
Right.
at the same time.
Yeah. That's fascinating to me that you're dealing with the disparate time frames because you're not only dealing with different technology, but you're dealing with different mindsets. And it's not just the mindset that develops because of the technology that they're using, but because of the spiritual aspect of their lives is completely
Absolutely.
different. And how they view their world around them is going to be completely different from the pagan point of view and the Christian point of view.
Absolutely. And one of the things is sort of as they're converting from paganism to Christianity, it's essentially a political decision. So
Mhm.
Iceland is about to tear itself apart, and the people realize either we're going to have one religion and one set of laws, and we can make this work, or there's going to be civil war. Um, but but just because they converted to Christianity really didn't mean they became Christian in the sense that we think today. For them,
Mhm.
they had already a pantheon of gods, so let's add one more. There's a story of one guy who was baptized 20 times because when they got baptized, they would get a present.
Oh,
So he kept allowing himself, and because he was telling someone that the last time he was baptized, he got this like garment or something. And he's like, that's like the lamest thing I ever got for being baptized. And it's funny, like, okay, so they were like, yeah, and they had these as pagans, they had these temples outside of their house for their gods, and then the churches they built looked exactly like them. I mean, it really took probably 100, 200 years before Iceland was really more the Christian nation that we see it as today.
Right. And I can imagine that being that way during the development of Christianity, as Christianity encountered other pagan religions. It didn't overwhelm them and then completely replace it. It was a gradual change, I guess, which is
Yeah,
why they were all the time fighting heresy, because
right.
they,
Absolutely. I mean, but if you look at major Christian holidays today, whether it's Christmas with the Christmas tree or Easter
yeah.
with the Easter, but those are pagan. They could not be more pagan if we try, because Christianity is like, okay, they love this kind of stuff. Let's just kind of incorporate it into ours and they'll be okay with it. And that's what happened in Iceland.
Yes. And it gets brought up and people go like, no, the Easter Bunny, that's Christian. I'm going like, no, no,
No, it
no.
is now, but not originally. Yeah, absolutely.
How else do you see challenges occurring in your dealing with the writing? Um,
I guess the other major challenge that we're I think all seeing is once it's published is how do we get it out to the people?
oh yes, yes, yes.
That's I mean I've tried with professional reviews and they're reaching out. What I'm doing right now, I'm reaching out to libraries directly
Mhm.
with a handout I put together with a synopsis and some excerpts from reviews, just saying, "Hey, I published this. Would you be interested? I come out and do a." I put together a presentation on um, the influence of the Viking Age cultures ranging from North America to North Africa. So if it's a fascinating story as far how far their influence stretched. So if people at libraries are interested in having presentations on that, I will
Mhm.
travel there and
Right.
do it. But I think there's such a competition now with books, and
Yes.
the big writers um, they get all the attention. And you go to a bookstore and there's a whole mountain of their newest novel
What?
piling up. That's what people read. So I think for those of us who are not that well known, it's always a challenge to sort of find that readership of people who most certainly would be interested in what we have to offer. They're just not aware of it.
And if you're not into the hot new genre,
Mhm.
it sort of gets lost in the wayside. Whereas I'm fascinated because I didn't know anything about it, and now that you've spoken about it, I'm going like, I want to read this. I want to read this. And so I think a lot of people who are true readers are that way. They're not
Mhm.
just gulping down one story after another. They're really interested in whatever they're reading is telling them about their world and how their world
Yes.
developed. And I think a lot of people who are true readers are like that. They want to understand all those ins and outs. They're less concerned with a rapid pace through a story to do five or six highlights and then move on.
Mhm.
That's not for me. I write historical mysteries. I'm more
Okay.
interested. I'm interested in the puzzle,
Mhm.
and how that puzzle gets to be solved than I am in anything else. It might get worked into there, but it's not what drives the story, and it's not what drives my writing of that story. And so I
But
think a lot. Go ahead. Go ahead.
there should be a readership for that because anyone who loved The Name of the Rose should love what you're writing because it's essentially the same kind of approach to storytelling.
But getting the word out is so hard. Um, and after a time, you go like, well, I'm not going to do Facebook because Facebook promised me 20,000 views, and it only 3,000 people saw it. So it's going like, no, no. So you just sometimes I think the best marketing tool is to write more books. uh,
Mhm.
and then one of them will catch somebody's eye, and then they'll get into the reading of it, or to do things like we're doing here with the
Mhm.
podcast. We're talking about your book, and it's inspiring me to read it, and hopefully others who hear about it will be also inspired to read it. Um, so marketing
Right.
is I think it's a challenge for virtually every writer. And some get lucky and they go on Book Talk and they become viral.
Mhm.
But that doesn't necessarily guarantee them a reader who will come back to them unless they have something coming out very quickly. Mhm.
Yeah, there is that. So I'm thinking I'm thinking about a children's book now, but beyond sort of long term, I'm going to write a trilogy of books. So I'm hoping that once people know that there's going to be two more,
Mhm.
that there might be more of an interest in that, in just like these. Because I've always sort of resisted the, oh, I'm going to make this a, thing that goes on forever.
Mhm.
But I think writers who do it tend to be more successful because their readers know, oh, I love this, and there's going to be more of that in the next book and the one after that. So those writers are really onto something there, I think.
Yes, but I worry that they're sacrificing their curiosity about story when they tell the same thing over and over again. Because
There is that.
I have to have a curiosity about the story for me to write it. You know,
Mhm.
I'm struggling with one right now because I think I overplanned it. And so my curiosity is over because I know how it's going to end. I know
Mhm.
what's going to happen in chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11, and so on. And
Mhm.
so my curiosity that will take me through the grunt work of sentence by sentence by sentence is that curiosity is lacking. Um, and so it's difficult. And I think when people write the same thing over and over again, I couldn't do that. Um,
I think there has to be like a much bigger story to justify breaking it up into multiple.
mhm,
You're right, because I went from a World War II story to a Viking Age story.
mhm.
Because people are like, don't you want to write another World War II story? I'm like, no, I just did. And it's interesting that you said curiosity, because when I wrote when I first started working with captives, this was in 2006, and I was working part-time as an art model, and the other model who was working with me said, there was a POW camp here in town. And I'm like, no, we're Germans. Were incarcerated. And she said, yeah, my dad always told me about the guy who committed suicide.
Ooh,
And I was like, why would you make it safely to a camp in North America and then kill yourself? So it was curious. And I started doing
right.
research, and I
Mhm.
found out that the camps were often run by Nazis. And if people did not cooperate with them, they would make it look like an accident and they would kill them and make
Right,
it look like. And that's when I was like, that's a fascinating thing, that even as a German growing up with our history in
right,
Germany, we are taught history. We don't
right.
tend to whitewash things like this is what happened between 1933 and 1945,
Mhm.
and you need to deal with that. So I mean, I had known a lot about this, but this was a new story. I
Right.
didn't know until I did the research. There were 700 camps across the entire United States, with almost 150,000 Germans.
I did not
Between,
realize there were so many.
yeah, between 1942, and then the last ones generally left around 1946 before they were
Mhm.
repatriated. And this is a part of World War II history I didn't know. So that curiosity, as you absolutely correctly call it, is what kept driving me to tell that story.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
to think about the motivations of characters, that
Mhm.
also
Yeah.
is curiosity. Why would
Mhm.
they think that way? Why would they do that? Why would that be the action they take or the reaction that they have to something? Um,
Yeah. And
mhm.
that's where there were a couple of characters who were sort of hardcore Nazis, and I had to find reasons why would they feel that way? And I had to go back to World War One and things they experienced during World War One and after World War One, where I could say, okay, we don't like the character or his viewpoint, but I can kind of show how it led from there to here.
Right. You can, if not necessarily sympathy, it's
Right.
understanding.
Yes.
an understanding. Yeah. And I think that makes the best, this is hard to say, that makes the best villains when we have an understanding of their motivations and their personality and what built it to be that way.
It's interesting as an actor, when I play a character that others might perceive as a villain, I always create an extremely extensive backstory
Mhm.
that lets me justify it. Because as a character, I can't approach him as a villain. Nobody thinks of themselves as a villain.
Right.
Everybody all think sort of like what I'm doing is absolutely correct. And I have
Mhm.
all the justifications for doing that. So that's where I think I always put in a lot of work for backstory as an actor in those situations because I need to bring that character to life in a way that it doesn't become a caricature. And to me, honesty in my performing as an actor and writing is always, I think stories will resonate with readers if they can tell it's an honest story and
Mhm.
it's coming from an honest place.
Right. And I think readers are more willing to accept things that give them, a little bit of bad feeling about that if they realize that there's truth
Mhm.
in what's being presented onto the page or
Yeah.
on stage, so to
We
speak.
might not excuse it, but we can understand it. There might
We
be a
can
level of
understand.
empathy
Right,
for what that person had to go through in his or her life to become that way.
right. Okay, sorry, I'm stumbling. Zoom just notified me that we are running out of time, and that was several minutes ago. So is there anything else that you would like to add in our last few minutes together?
No, unless you have any other questions you'd like to ask me. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's always nice talking to another writer who is also sort of doing similar things and having similar experiences. So I've really very much enjoyed this.
You have fascinated me. This has been a wonderful, wonderful interview. And I greatly appreciate you agreeing to this. Where can people find your books?
So Bergthora Saga is available on Barnes and Noble, on
Mhm.
Amazon. We've been recommending bookstore.org because it's an independent bookstore,
Right.
and it's
Mhm.
if people Google it, it's all over the internet because it's distributed through Ingram, so it's pretty much all over the world. I've seen
Mhm.
ads in Japan and in Australia. Um, and it is also now available as a Kindle. So if people don't like having paperback copies, I still like having something in my hand. I don't know how you feel about
Well,
that.
I tried to
But it
convert to the Kindle, but I've gone back to print. I like
okay,
holding something.
okay.
I like being able to flip back several pages. Did I miss something? And then go back forward to where I was. And that's not easy to do on an electronic form. What about your other book about the POWs?
Captives is the same thing. It's also available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I know there's some other. The Permanent Press also sells it on their website because they're
Mhm.
the publisher.
Okay, great. All right.
So yeah,
Thank you, Rainer. It was
thank you
wonderful
so much. It's
talking to
great
you.
meeting you. You have a great day.
You too. Next up for the Right Focus, we start our series for autumn. I had so much fun last year with examining poetry to find lessons that fiction writers can use that I'm bringing back fall into poetry. First, though, to finish September, will be 2 episodes on tools that I use. Then October gives us fall into poetry. Join us. You may be surprised by what you can learn from poetry too. Thanks for listening to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers at all levels, hosted by Emma Lee from Writers Inc. Books, assisted by Renee Black and Edie Runes. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Music is licensed through Audio Jungle, called Background Music Loop. Its creator is Alexander Polishchuk, known on Audio Jungle as Plastic 3. The music comes in different iterations. Show notes and resource links for this and other episodes can be found at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Write to us at winkbooks@aol.com when you have questions, comments, and speculations. We will try to answer you as quickly as possible. By the way, we will not mind your email address. That's rude. If you find value in our content, share with your writing friends or write a review. We're small beans here without the advertising budget of the big peeps, and you can make a difference. And whatever occurs, write on.